A very good morning to everyone. Today we are going to start with our fourth chapter in history, which is the Mughal Empire. Can you see the red fort here? This was considered as the residence of the Mughal emperors. Now, let's see who were the Mughals. The Mughals were the descendants of two great lineages of rulers. So, now let's clear the meaning of descendants. Descendants means a people who belongs from the same family and who has ruled long time ago. And lineages means the members of the person's family who are directly related to that person and who have lived a long time before him or her. So Mughals were the descendants of two lineages, that is from the mother's side it was Genghis Khan, the ruler of Mongol tribe. Now you might be confused that it is written Genghis, but it is pronounced as Genghis Khan. Mongol is a tribe in Mongolia, and Mongolia is a country above China, and we all know that China is our neighboring country. Whereas from the father's side they were the ancestors of Timur. That means these are the people who ruled Iran, Iraq and modern day Turkey. Whereas Genghis Khan ruled Central Asia and China as well, and Mongolia. But there's an interesting fact that Mughals did not like to be associated with Mongols, but they were very proud of their Timurid ancestry. Why they were not like to be called Mongols? Because Genghis Khan's memories were associated with the massacre of innumerable people. Massacre means killing of thousands of people. It was also linked with the Uzbeks. That means it's also a Mongol tribe in Mongolia, which was under the control of Genghis Khan. And having the friendship with their competitor is not logical at all. So that is why they hate to be called, or they did not like to be associated with the Mongolians or their mother's side. And why they were proud of their Timurid ancestry? Because their great ancestors had captured Delhi in 1398. Alright, so that's why they, very much proud to be called the successors of the Timurid ancestry. Okay, so let us see our first Mughal emperor. It is said that with the coming of Babur, when he has defeated Ibrahim Lodi of Delhi Sultanate, that we have discussed in the last chapter, the starting of Mughal empire has begun. Okay, so let's see now who was the first Mughal emperor. He was the Babur. He has ruled just for 4 years, that is from 1526 to 1530 Common Era. Okay, he has succeeded to the throne of Fergana in 1494 Common Era. Now, what is Fergana? Fergana is a part of Uzbekistan. Okay, Uzbekistan is a country in the Central Asia. So, first he has got the throne of that. And when he got that, he was just 12 years old. But he was not accepted by his relatives. He was forced to leave the throne due to the invasion of another Mongol group, the Uzbeks, that I have told you already. After years of wandering from one place to another, he has seized Kabul in 1504. Then, as we know, that in 1526 he has defeated Sultan of Delhi, that was Ibrahim Lodi, and then he has captured Delhi and Agra. Alright, so after Babur, his son Humayun has taken place to the throne of Mughal Empire. He has ruled from 1530 to 1540. Then, as we have seen in the last chapter, that Sher Shah Suri has defeated Humayun and taken the throne. But immediately after few years, he has regained his position. Okay, so Humayun has divided his inheritance according to the will of his father. Sher Khan defeated Humayun at Chausa, we have already discussed, and then he has to be run away to Iran. In Iran, he has received the help from Safavid Khan and recaptured Delhi in 1555. The next year itself, he has died in an accident in the building, which is built by him. After that, Akbar, he was a great and very famous Mughal emperor. When he became the emperor, he was just 13 years old. His reign was divided into three periods, that is, from 1556 to 1570, then 1570 to 1585, then from 1585 to 1605, Common Era. Now the question arises that why his reign was divided, because these three periods have different significance. If we talk about our first period, which is from 1556 to 1570 Common Era, Akbar became independent of the his agents like Bayram Khan and other members of his domestic staff. Military campaigns were launched against the Suris and other Afghans, against the neighboring kingdoms of Malwa and Gondwana. So this was all about capturing, and defeating Sisodia capital of Chittor and getting the control over Ranthambore. If we talk about 1570 to 1585, then military campaigns were led to Gujarat and then following to east in Bihar, Bengal and Orissa. Okay, and if we talk about 1585 to 1605, it was a time of the expansion of Akbar's empire. Campaigns were launched in northwest. So this was all about Akbar. If we talk about Jahangir, his original name was Nuruddin Muhammad Salim, but he was called by his imperial name Jahangir. He was the fourth Mughal emperor who ruled over Delhi from 1605 till 1627. Now, why he got this name Jahangir? That means conqueror of the world. World conqueror, you can say. Jahan means world, Gir means to grab. So he was the one who was going to grab the world. That's why he got this imperial name. We have already heard about his tale of his relationships with the Mughal courtesan Anarkali, and we have seen the movies, literature, art, etc. Okay, then we'll talk about Shah Jahan. His full name was Shahabuddin Muhammad Khurram. Okay, his name Shah Jahan comes from the Persian meaning the ruler of the world. Shah Jahan. Okay, he was called the architect of Mughal Empire because in his reign there were several beautiful architecture which was built. Example, Taj Mahal, the symbol of love in Agra. Okay, so his reign has been one of the most prosperous ages of the Indian civilization because there were numerous buildings or the architecture which was given by Shah Jahan to the upcoming generations. Let's talk about our last Mughal emperor, Aurangzeb. His original name was Muhyiddin Muhammad. He was also called Aurangzeb or by his title Alamgir. He was the sixth Mughal emperor. He ruled over most of the Indian subcontinent through Islamic Sharia. Okay. He was, you can say, he was the emperor when Britishers came in India. But after that, there was no powerful ruler which came in India to rule. Yes, the Mughal Empire continued to be ruled. It was Bahadur Shah Zafar who was the last Mughal emperor. But I am saying the most significant one was the Aurangzeb. Okay, his reign was lasted for 49 years. That is from 1658 to 1707. All right. But Mughals were known for their, kind behavior with the other rulers. But Aurangzeb was a one when he led the military campaigns to other parts. So it was a Maratha power when, rebellion has been led to. So he has insulted the Maratha chieftain Shivaji. Okay, so this insult has led to great consequences in the future. We'll discuss about it later on. So now let's see that how the Mughals followed the traditions of succession. See, the Mughals did not believe in the rule of primogeniture. There were two terms which is new for you. First is primogeniture and other is co-parcenary. Okay, so what is primogeniture? In this, they don't they believe that eldest son become the inherited successor of the father's estate. Instead, they believe in co-parcenary, which means the division of the inheritance or the property should be divided among all the sons. Okay, so they follow the co-parcenary. Understood? So tell me one thing, according to you, which would be the actual way of getting the division of inheritance? What will you suggest? I mean, what will you favor? Primogeniture or co-parcenary? Obviously, dividing equally is the most appropriate one. Okay, now let us see the Mughal relations with the other rulers. See, we have seen that Mughals were constantly campaigning against the rulers who refused to accept the authority. Obviously, why will you fight the person who's going to favor you? So you are going to get the campaign, military campaign led who is against you. So they continuously or constantly led campaigns against the ones who were not accepting their authority. But as the Mughals became powerful, many other rulers joined them from by their own will. The Rajputs are the good example of this. You all know, you might have heard that many of them married their daughters into Mughal families and received high positions. Uh, you have heard about, Jodha Bhai. Yes. Okay. So, the mother of Jahangir was, Kachawa princess who was a daughter of Rajput ruler. Again, the mother of Shah Jahan also was a Rathore princess, the daughter of Rajput ruler of Marwar. So we can say that yes, many of the women of the other rulers of the Rajput rulers were married in the Mughal families. Okay, as we have discussed this, the Sisodia Rajputs, refused to accept Mughal authority for a long time. Now you might have heard about Maharana Pratap. He was a Sisodia Rajput. He has refused to accept the Mughal authority for a long time. The best part about the Mughals were that even they defeat someone or some other ruler, they treat them with honor. Okay, the defeated ones were treated honorably by the Mughals. They were then they accept their supremacy. Then they were given back their lands called Watan as assignments. That means they can rule, but they have to collect taxes and give to the Mughals, and they were being considered as the subordinates under the Mughal supremacy. The careful balance between defeating but not humiliating their opponents enabled the Mughals to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. But I told you about Aurangzeb. This balance was not being, continued in the Aurangzeb's time because he has insulted Shivaji. Alright. So let's talk about Mansabdars and Jagirdars. As the empire expanded, there were different regions which were come up, and the Mughals recruited diverse bodies of people. Okay, so these people were from Iranians, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas, and many other groups. So those who joined Mughal service were tagged as Mansabdars. Okay, so what do you mean by Mansabdar? It refers to an individual who holds a mansab, who holds a rank, who holds a position in the Mughal Empire. It was a grading system used by the Mughals. Now, why this was given? Now, why the people were given rank? Because it has helped Mughals to fix the rank, salary, and the military responsibilities. Rank and salary were determined by their numerical value called Zat. The higher the Zat, the more prestigious your position is in the court, and the more is your salary. Understood? If you talk about, Akbar's reign, there were the nobles with a Zat of 5,000 were ranked higher than those of 1,000. Obviously, 5,000 is more. So the people who ranked as 5,000 has more salary, has more high position. Okay. There were 29 Mansabdars in the Akbar's reign with the rank of 5,000 Zat. But when Aurangzeb was ruling, it was increased to 79. That means it has increased the expenditure of the state and there was a misbalance of the administration. So, what is the responsibility of a Mansabdar? A Mansabdar's military responsibilities required him to maintain a specified numbers of savars or cavalrymen. Okay, that means the soldiers on the horses are called cavalrymen. The Mansabdar brought his cavalrymen for review, got them registered, their horses were branded, and then they received money to pay them salary. Clear? Mansabdars received their salaries as revenue assignments called jagirs, which was somewhat like iktas. We have seen that in the Delhi Sultanate, the people were given iktas, the land to rule, and whatever revenue is collected, it has been considered as the salary of muktis. In the same way, the Mansabdars were given jagirs and the revenue is collected as their salary and also the salary for their soldiers. But unlike muktis, most Mansabdars did not actually reside on their own jagirs. Okay? They only have the rights to collect the revenue of their assignments and which was collected for them by their servants. Not, personally they won't go and collect. So they have the servants to collect that. While the Mansabdars themselves serve in some other part of the country, not on their own land or jagir. Students, one interesting fact. In Akbar's period of ruling, these jagirs or the land were carefully assessed. Okay, so that the revenues were roughly equal to the salary of Mansabdar. By Aurangzeb's reign, this was no longer the case and the actual revenue collected was often less than the granted sum. There was a huge increase in the number of Mansabdars. I told you from 29 it has jumped to 79, which meant a long wait before they received a jagir. Obviously, by one they would be getting the land. So, the more number of people, the more the queue of waiting is. These are the factors created the shortage in the number of jagirs or the land. As a result, many jagirdars tried to extract as much as revenue as possible while they had jagir. So they were not, they were just manipulating and getting the higher revenue than what is prescribed by the state. Aurangzeb was unable to control these developments in the last year of his ruling period and the peasantry or the farmers therefore suffered tremendously. Okay, so we can say there was a downfall of the people. So now let's see what is Jabt and Zamindars. So the main source of income available to the Mughal rulers, or I can say any other ruler, was tax on the produce of peasantry. So whatever the farmers are producing, that was considered as the main source of income. In most places, the peasants paid taxes through the rural elites, that is the headmen or the local chieftains. The Mughals used one term called zamindars to describe all intermediaries, where they were local headmen of villages or powerful chieftains. So what was the role of zamindars? That they collect revenue from the farmers and then they are going to pay to the Mughal rulers. The farmers are not going to personally give the tax to the emperors, but they have to give to the middlemen called zamindars, and then zamindars will give to emperors. Okay, so Akbar's has a very smart financial minister or the revenue minister, Todermal. He has carried out a survey of the crop yields, its prices and areas cultivated for a 10-year period. Okay, that is from 1570 to 1580. On the basis of this data, tax was fixed on each crop in cash. Each province was divided into revenue circles with its own schedule of revenue rates for individual crops. For example, if there are two areas, area A and area B, or revenue circle A or revenue circle B, so if the wheat is grown in both the areas, the prices may be different in both the areas. Okay, so this revenue system of dividing the place into revenue circles and fixing the prices was termed as Zabt. Clear? It was prevalent in those areas where Mughal administrators could survey the land and keep careful accounts. But this was not possible in the provinces which were far away from Delhi, which was Gujarat and Bengal. Clear? In some areas, we can say the zamindars exercised a great deal of power. The exploitation by the Mughal administrators could drive them to rebellion. Okay, sometimes zamindars and peasants of the same caste, come against for the rebel against the Mughal authority. These peasant revolts challenged the stability of the Mughal Empire from the end of 17th century. Now let's have a closer look to our very famous Mughal emperor, which is Akbar. What were his policies? The broad features of administration were laid down by Akbar and they were beautifully discussed by Abul Fazl in his book Akbar Nama. Particularly, he has, given the 3-volume book, and in the last volume, which is the N.A. Akbari, he has described about the administration which was carried by the Akbar. Abul Fazl explained that the empire was divided into provinces called subas, and each suba was governed by a subedar who carried both political and military functions. Each province also had a financial officer or diwan. Okay, for the maintenance of peace and order, they were having, the subedar was, assisted by many other officers. You can see here. First one is Bakshi. Bakshi was a military paymaster. That means the one who's going to give the salaries to the soldiers. Okay. Next was Sadr. He was a minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage. Next is Faujdars. That means the military commanders. So one is for commanding the military, another is for giving the salary. Then is Kotwal, the police commander. Then is Diwan. We have discussed the financial officer. So a subedar, who is considered the governor, is being assisted by all these officers to have the smooth functioning of the administration in the area. Clear? Okay, now let's have a quick, differentiation between iqtadar, mansabdars and subedars. It might be confusing, but after this you won't have any confusion. See, first if we talk about the Delhi Sultanate, the land which was given to rule was called Iqta, whereas it is called Suba or Jagir in the Mughal Empire. Okay, the holder of the Iqta is called Iqtadar or Mukti, whereas the holder of Jagir is called Jagirdar or Mansabdar. Clear? Or Subedar also we can say. Now what is the function of Iqtadar? They collect tax from the Iqta, from their land. They administer their land and they pay salaries to the soldiers from the taxes they collect from their Iqtas. Clear? Now what is the function of Mansabdars? They collected taxes from their Jagirs as their salaries, paid salaries from the same amount, they pay salaries to the soldiers also. Whereas Subedars, they were the governor of the land called Suba. They were being assisted by many officers to maintain peace and order. They also provide military support. Okay. Now we have discussed about that Iqtadar live in their own Iqta and administer, whereas Mansabdar never lived in their Jagir, but Subedar lived in their Subas. Clear? So Mansabdars were just having the land called Jagir, and they were ruling some other part of the country. If we talk about Abul Fazl, he was very close friend of Akbar and his courtier. He was given the responsibility of writing the history of his reign. I told you, he wrote a 3-volume history called Akbar Nama. First one, volume 1, was dealt with Akbar's ancestors. Second one it recorded the event of Akbar's ruling period. And it is the third one in which the whole administration was being, discussed, which is N.A. Akbari. Okay. So in that book, what all things we have seen? It In that book we have seen that Akbar's administration, how their household, army, etc. The revenues, the geography of his empire, the traditional and culture of the people living in India, the statistical details about the crops, yields, prices, wages, revenues, everything was discussed in Ain e Akbari. Okay, now Akbar was really interested in in the religion and social customs of different people. He interacted with many people of different faith, and he realized, then that the meeting should be held with different people. There were ulama, brahmanas, Jewish priests, Zoroastrians, etc. These discussions were held in the place called Ibadat Khana. Okay, so after interacting with many people, he realized that these religious scholars who emphasized rituals and this and dogma were often by gods. Now, this is a new term. Dogma means a statement or an interpretation declared as authoritative with the expectations that it would be followed without question. That means some religious ritual which has to be followed without having some logical reasoning behind it. Okay, so but the person who is intolerant about the religious belief without questioning, they were called bigots. So their teachings created divisions and disharmony among his subjects. So has led Akbar to the idea of Sulh Kul or universal peace. This idea of tolerance did not discriminate between the people of different religions in his realm. Instead, he focused on a system of ethics, honesty, justice, peace that was universally applicable. Abul Fazl helped Akbar in framing a vision of governance around his idea of Sulh Kul. Okay? So here we have come to the end of a chapter, but I won't be leaving this without any, ending. This enormous wealth and resources commanded by the Mughal elite made them extremely powerful. But after this Aurangzeb's reign, then coming of the Britishers, all these things has led to the decline of Mughal empire. After defeating Bahadur Shah Zafar, the Mughal empire has come to an end. All right. So I hope you understood that how Mughal emperors came into being and how they have ended their rule. Thank you and have a splendid day ahead.